So, good morning, hello to all my YouTube buddies, and for anybody else that's going to attempt an exhaust manifold removal on an F-Series Ford truck, I have the infamous bolt breakage. The truck has about 106,000 miles, 14 years in service. It's given me good service over those years and has plenty more to go, as you all know. So, I experienced the ticking noise about 6 months ago in the winter. This truck operates in northern climate, in the salty roads of Michigan most of the time. It has done some interstate mileage up and down the coast to the south. However, most of it has been salt ridden. I've tried to take good care of it and keep it flushed. And the truck is in pristine condition with the exception of the underbody, which unfortunately is susceptible to corrosion. So I'm just going to thumbnail a high-level view of this operation. I have looked at many YouTube videos on this subject, looking at how other people attacked it. I'm probably going to do mine just a little different. I'm a little older. My hands aren't quite as nimble as some of you all have. So in preparation, I am taking the right-hand coil tower off, which gives me wide open access to the manifold. Now, the bolt that broke was the number 4 upper, and here's the bolt. I'm going to show it to you. As you might have expected, obviously the corrosion on the outer threads, and then if you look at the inner side of this thing, you'll notice where the contact area was on the manifold, and the corrosion underneath it, which really doesn't mean anything because it's an empty hole in that space behind the nut. But if you look at these threads, they're in really nice shape. This stud came out fairly effortlessly, with the exception of the frictional torque requirements of getting that rust bond broken loose from the manifold. This came out pretty easy. So with high anticipation, I'm expecting the other 6 to come out very easily. The stud that broke off, I'm expecting to come out very easily, and I will use some kind of stud extractor, or if it's vice grips that does it, that's all I'm going to need, then that's what we'll do. Besides that, taking that coil tower off might require some slight raising of the engine on the right hand side, but I doubt it. But if I have to, I will, because I like to get a straight shot on the stud with the torquing wrench, removal wrench. Give me a straight shot so I don't risk breaking one of these, because God knows where it might be fractured somewhere else on that manifold. So with that, I am going to start the process, and I'm very appreciative of any comments. This is instructional. This is not always the best way to do it. It's just another way to do it. And having some experience in mechanics throughout my entire career, automotive technology, farm equipment, etc., I've done many procedures, many different ways, but I like this one because I can take my time with it and not worry, whereas some of you that may be under the duress of a time clock might have a different approach. So thank you again for your attention, and I do hope that this video helps you. Alright, now as you can see, the coil tower has been removed, and this enables some really great access to that manifold. And we'll take a little closer look in here. It was this back bolt that, as you can see, it's broke flush with the outside skin of the manifold. This is the one that I took out here, number 3, and showed you earlier, and I was able to remove that quite normally. And then the front 2, those will come out nice. So it's going to be basically the bottom 4 that we're going to have to deal with, and hopefully those will come easy too. The 2 buckle up flange bolts, I've broken those loose, and in looking at this I'm thinking maybe this would be a good time to clean up or renew the engine oil dipstick tube. Be a great time to do that. It would also be a great time to put a new starter in, even though I don't need one. 100,000 miles, hey, why not? So I'm thinking about doing that. So basically, taking off this tower yielded many great advantages. So it was no picnic taking it off, but an angle grinder to take the heads of the hot rivets off, and then drilling the holes out until we got up to about a 7/16 bit, and that weakened it enough that you could drive it all through with a punch. So down here is how the assembly looks. I left the top part of the shock absorber intact. I don't really feel like replacing that because I just put them on a few years ago. Nothing wrong with them. You do have to unscrew the axle bumper mount, which consists, you just pop this off of this little bell-shaped receptacle, and then this screws up into the frame. So in order to get access to that bolt, you have to just work this sideways. It'll pop right out of there, and then you have bolt access. So basically that's about it. It wasn't any big deal, but I will tell you that doing this is a whole lot easier than ripping the top of that engine off and creating more problems unforeseen. So we can all share in our opinions how we would do this, but I'm retired, I got lots of time, and my hands aren't as nimble as you guys that are younger. So getting at things like this I really appreciate, and it wasn't a big deal to take that tower off. I would exercise extreme amounts of care when you're jacking this thing up and making sure it's supported properly. You'll notice that I have some very heavy duty Harbor Freight ramps, which were the last of a dying breed. They sold those to me, the last 2 they had. They're rated 20 tons, and I feel very comfortable working with them. The reason I'm using them today for this purpose is because I don't have to crouch down too far to get at up here. So the next step will be to start removing the bolts. I will try to set a camera up in here as I try to remove them, so you can get a feel for what I'm going through. Okay, so here we are back at the scene of the crime, and we're going to now embark on removing the exhaust manifold. And just as a quick review, the initial problem started right here with a broken stud, which allowed the head to warp, and there is a fair amount of play between the joining parts for the gasket to wiggle around. We know that there's a carbon trail, so rest assured that's where it's leaking. The bolt that I showed you in the introduction came from this location, and from all assessments that bolt was in great shape. And now we have to remove the remaining top 2 and the entire bank of 4 down below. One other point, you can tell that removing that coil tower made access extremely easy. So what I want to do is experiment here a little bit on this first one. And what I'm going to do is try to record the turning torque required to remove that front top fastener. And what I've got is a beam type inch-pound torque wrench. I also have another beam type which is a little larger in scale. It's also an inch-pound wrench. This is one I've had for years. And then finally I have the good old Harbor Freight Saturday Night Special snap torque wrench. I prefer not to use this one. I would rather bring the scale of the wrench up slowly, because this is about the only way I'm going to get to record it. I don't know how high that torque is going to be. So I will try to stay out of the picture if I can. So if you can bear with me. Beautiful resting point for my wrench, by the way. And 120 inch, 140, 160, 180, 200. So obviously this isn't big enough, so we're going to switch over to the larger sized. This scale goes to 600. And here we go. So I'm at 200, 250, 3, 4, 450, 500. It broke loose. So I'm going to take another swing. And that's not too bad. And it's coming out. Good sign. Alright, now I'm going to switch to a regular standard style hand wrench so I don't ruin my torque wrench. I'm going to turn that baby out. I know you're wondering why I'm not using a ratchet. Well, because I'm too lazy to go over and get it. I brought this over. So far so good. I had no doubt really that that would come out as one piece, and I know it is coming out as one piece. We're almost there. And there it is. Well, look at that. I got the nut instead. Isn't that something? Well, the next step is going to be to get onto this with the regular little socket that tightened it, and it'll be a real test to see whether that does in fact come out. I really don't want to do that right now. Reason being is I'm probably going to end up welding a nut or something to extract that. I might even spray it down a little bit with some seafoam, and hopefully we can lessen the opportunities for that to break, because I think I would end up breaking that right now. So we're going to move on to the next one. This one is over 600. That's quite a lot. So what I'm going to have to do is re-rig up my wrenches, get something a little bigger. I have a feeling that nut's not going to come, and we'll try again. There's quite a fair amount of corrosion on that nut. So I will readjust, and we'll get back to you shortly. Alright, we're going to talk about what I ended up with here. Some of these came out and some didn't, as you can tell. This one here, the nut came off, as you know. This one here, both the stud and nut came off together. Number 2, lower, the nut. And then the upper, when I thought it was turning, it broke. And the reason being was it was frozen in the flange hole. Number 3, just the nut. And the upper this was the first one I took out and showed you on the first part of the video. This is the one that initially broke in service and caused the whole problem. You can see there was quite a bit of carbon exhaust blowing out. And then luckily number 4, lower, the whole thing came out at once. So I'm really pleased with what I've seen so far. It ain't perfect, but this is the hand that I was dealt. Now I'm going to do a couple different things here. To start, to get the 3 long ones out, I'm going to just soak them a little bit with penetrating oil, and then I'm going to get a pair of metric nuts to thread up on there as close as I can get it to the head, and I'm going to attempt to back them out that way by double nutting. Hopefully those aren't in there too badly. I think the reason the nuts came off was that I had soaked the entire hardware pack in penetrating oil, and I had a couple days to sit there and think about it, so it's probably because of that the nut had less resistance to high torque, and therefore facilitated the removal of the nut only, but not the studs. So that's okay. I do have my second option. I have a large stud extractor. It's about a $40 item. You've seen it. It's been around for 50 years. It works on an eccentric. I might try that depending on the outcome of the double nutting if I determine that it's too hard. Okay, picking up again before my battery had just died. I spoke of the double nutting that I was going to try on the 3 long remaining ones, and I have the cam eccentric that I may try. Use that to get those out is the last resort. Probably put a little heat on it with some MAP gas. As is the case for these ones with the studs sticking out, partially broken, number 4 and number 2 on the upper. So got a little work to do. I did do a trial in the vise with a broken piece to see how difficult it was to put a 1/16 drill bit in at low speed down the center of this thing, and surprisingly they're not as hard as I thought they were. So we're going to go to the next step and do this extraction. I may get a chance, if I think this is going to come easy, I may film it. I don't have an extra set of hands here, so I have to work slowly, but bear with me. We're going to get these out and you'll see. See you next clip. Okay, you can see here I'm double nutting, and that brought it loose. It didn't take a whole lot of effort, really. It's kind of sticky coming out of there, but torque required to break this loose was, a kid could have done it. Not to say that the stud was loose, but not as bad as I had expected. Sorry, got the camera off center here. I'm trying to do two things at once. So what I'm going to do is set the camera down and come back to you, and we'll do the one behind it. Okay, as you can see, I was able to remove the number 3 lower, and now I'm advancing to the, I removed the number 2 lower, and now I'm advancing to the number 3 lower, and I just gave it the initial bite, and it came very easy, just like the other one did. So why use a butcher knife when you can use a paring knife, right? If you start with the easiest, least intrusive way to do this, and I thought the double nut feature was an extremely, I hadn't seen anybody else use it, but it's something that I have done over the years, stuff like this. Sorry, my fingers aren't as strong as they used to be. So there you go, I've got it out. And so looking at the threads, are all nice and clean as they were the day they put them into the factory. So that's, now I got one left up here on number 1, the upper. This one might be a little different because there's a fair amount of corrosion up there, but I'm hoping this yields the same results, and now I'll be down to these other 2 broken ones. Alright, so we're back, and just to update you where I'm at right now, I have managed to get the upper stud out of number 4, and then the upper stud out of number 1. They were perceived to be in there very tight. However, earlier this morning I heated those 2 studs in addition to the one that's left here remaining with a screw extractor on it, and I'll tell you how I did it, of no surprise. And here's the 2 studs that I got out. The one that's in the upper view is the number 4, which started this whole problem and broke, and then the one on the lower part of my finger is the number 1, which was fully intact. However, I sawed the end of it off to, and I'll show you, use this kind of an extractor, which I got from Harbor Freight as a set, and that's what you see up in there right now. I've hammered it on there, so I got a nice tight fit. This one's a little more difficult because the corrosion that was on this one was beyond the intensity of any of the other ones, and mainly due to the fact that the this hole was used for location for assembly. On the manifold, it had a smaller diameter hole drilled in the manifold, so there wasn't a whole lot of breathing room. So unfortunately what happened was, attempting to take that off, I twisted it off right there, and it was out about 1/2 of an inch from the surface of the head. So what I've done, in the case of the other 2, I did put heat right onto the studs this morning so that the ferrous studs would glow orange. They've cooled off for a while here. The casting temperature right now is at 83 degrees, so it has warmed up a little bit. Don't know if that has any impact on the aluminum, but just to give it a little help, I took a pencil tip propane torch, believe it or not, propane, one of these little jewels right here, off of a small portable tank. And what I did was I heated the area right around the stud. I did not heat the stud. So I worked the casting and for about a minute. And then using, of all things, a deck screw impact driver by Milwaukee, which is this little jewel right here, 9.6 volts, with an extension to slide up on that extractor. Believe it or not, after about 15 seconds of hammering after heat application, I was able to get number 4 and number 1 out. So I'm down to the last one, guys, and I'm going to take this one out, I hope, the same way. I've put a lot of seafoam on it. I've scraped around the threads a little bit, what little exposure there is where it goes into the head, in hopes that something would wick into it. And I've taken a hammer and I've driven that screw extractor right onto the broken stud, and I'm waiting for my battery to go to full charge. For this little deck screwdriver, it's amazing how much power it has, and I'm going to attempt to get it out. Now, I don't know how this is going to go. I believe that my backup plan eventually is going to end up being either welding a nut on, which my good friend Andre has promised to do for me, or possibly I may drill it out, heat it again, and then use a smaller internal type extractor bit. So I'm going to stop right here, and I can't hold the camera, do two things at once. I wish I could, but I'm going to try this and I'll let you know. Okay, I could not get enough bite on that screw extractor, and it keeps taking material off threads, so I'll try to get a picture of this, see if I can show you what I'm working with. I don't know if that's focused in right or not, but that's what I got. There's still room to weld a small nut on it. I may let it go at that, because this one here looks pretty nasty. See if I can get a better shot of what I'm up against here. There it is. Alright, so fun and games. Alright, I'm going to sign off for a second till I figure out the next step. Okay, I am back now with the results, finally. As you may recall, in that last stud, which was on number 2 that had broken off, my sincere appreciation to my good friend Andre, who is well experienced in removing these kinds of studs, welding nuts on and other means to get into a submerged stud and building up the stud so it can be grasped from the outside. In this case, we just screwed on a regular M8 nut to the remaining part, and Andre used the highest heat setting on my MIG welder with adequate wire feed to bring the nut up to a very hot stage. Some of that heat transferred inside to the stud, but he was able to get a great bonding between the nut and the stud, and on use of an open-end wrench, we were able to, or shall I say, he was able to turn the remnants out of number 2. So as you can see, all the studs are now out, and I'd just like to do a quick review of the failure modes that I encountered in this process. So we're going to move the camera down to here, where I'm going to show you what is left. As you'll notice, working from left to right, 3 of the studs came out with the nuts intact. 2 of them came out with the nuts coming off first, but still, by using a double nutting procedure and a combination wrench, I was able to get the full stud out. These two, this one was on number 4. This one was on number 1. This one was on number 2. This is the one that really broke the first time in service while I was driving. I was able to use a Harbor Freight extractor and a very low-powered impact wrench to remove those two here. And that was just pure luck, I think. And then finally, this one here, which was on number 2 upper, that I twisted off, and Andre was able to get the remnants out, and I've lost the piece of that. I show it to you. But point being, they're not all going to come out the same way, as you know. You just have to work through it, take your time, be patient like I was. This wasn't a one-day process for me because I have some issues with my eyes with being able to focus at a very close distance, so having Andre available to do that and be able to see with a MIG welder, and also through his vast experience, was two great assets for me, so my hat's off to him. So going back to the motor now, so again on this F-250 where the coil tower I removed, the process now will be to buckle up all the new parts as soon as I take the opportunity to put a new starter in this while I'm right here at 100,000 miles. I think it would be smart money. And then buckling up the coil tower using grade 8 appropriately sized fasteners with red Loctite to ensure that they don't vibrate or jar loose. These 5, plus there's 2 more down underneath here, which also have the same thing. I have to put bolts in there as well. So that is it. I'm not going to go through the assembly procedure. The main part is to show you what I ran into. It's not by any means the perfect way to remove anything. I'm not advocating that. I'm just showing you what I ran into, and I sincerely hope that this helps somebody else. And in closing, feel free to comment in the comments section to share your experiences. Negative criticism probably won't be honored, but if you have fruitful thoughts to help other people, I'm all in favor of you sharing those stories with everyone else. So for now, that's it, and in closing, good luck on your project.